Let's retry this. All right. Good evening, everybody. I am sitting down here this week. This is our second episode of the Log Talk podcast brought to you by Pertinier Outdoors. So I'm sitting here tonight with my Uncle Chris Harvey and Brian Davis, who is my Uncle Chris's good friend. So I wanted to get together with these guys. You know, on the last podcast, we talked about some of the things that we have coming up next. And three of us have got some really exciting stuff coming up here in the next week and a half. We are all headed out to Colorado for elk and a few of us for mule deer. Uncle Chris was fortunate enough to draw a mule deer tag as well as getting an over-the-counter elk tag. So we've got a lot going on. The three of us are probably spending 95% of our awake time thinking about the high peaks of Colorado and what we're going to be doing here in a few weeks. So,
2 weeks.
Yeah. Well, it is about 2 weeks for you guys. You guys are leaving a couple days later, but I can't stop thinking about it. So we're
a lot of preparation.
Yeah, nonstop preparation. So I guess we'll start off. I'll start with you, Uncle Chris. If you just want to introduce yourself, maybe give a little bit of your background in the outdoors. You know, what you do for a living now. I think that's kind of what brings you and Brian together. I want to get into that a little bit too. So.
Yeah. Well, first off, I want to say thank you for having me on your second podcast. It's quite an honor. I think Pertinier is going to take off pretty good with this.
Pertinier hope so.
Yeah. It's good that you guys are really obviously advocating for the outdoors and hunting and so forth. But yeah, my name's Chris Harvey. I'm the youngest in the family. Obviously, your dad is my oldest brother. How it all started basically was we were just an outdoors family from the get-go. It's all we knew was to go hunting. Back in the 70s, we'd see our dad go deer hunting and bring home, a buck on Thanksgiving morning. As soon as we were old enough, 8, 9 years old, he was taking us to hunting camp. There was really it didn't even seem like there was an option, like you would just hunt. That's what everybody in my family did. So we did that. We hunted, probably throughout the 80s. I graduated high school in 87. So, did obviously gun hunting. I got into archery at that time, and archery seemed, kind of new. Compound bows were brand new at that time, and my dad bought me a Jennings. I never got a deer with it. Nobody really showed me what to do. Back then, my dad would just point me in my dad didn't even bow hunt. So I would have to look to my brothers. But he basically just went and walked around the woods. And I remember climbing up in a tree one time. I didn't even have a tree stand. So, but I loved hunting. I went out and I didn't care if I got anything. It was just fun. So I hunted and I got a few deer. And then, high school got busy. And then after high school, I pretty much would just hunt shotgun opening day like everybody else in Western New York. And then went off and joined the Marines for 8 years. Really didn't hunt at all in the Marines. I'd come home for a bear hunt once a year in the Adirondacks. But when I did move home with my family in 1999, that's when it really took off. That's when, your Uncle Tim, my other brother, gave me a compound bow. And I started hunting, and it just became a passion at that point. I couldn't get enough of it. It was like I saw hunting in a different light. Being 29 years old, it was a lot of fun. The kids were young, but I would go out when I could and try to do hunts on not public land, but we have some private land here, some farmland. So basically from 1999 on, it became almost an obsession, probably a little too much, but all I did was hunt. I'd hunt with a bow. It took me 2 or 3 years to start killing deer, bucks in particular. And then I started really getting good at it and learning how to hunt whitetail during the rut, what to do and so forth. And obviously I continued the gun hunting as well. And the bear hunting. Once a year, the Harveys have our annual bear hunting trip in the Adirondacks. And I did get a black bear, I think 2003. So that was definitely a high point in my hunting career. And I missed one too, a couple years later. And
yeah.
I could say that was a low point, but I was fortunate enough to see one out in the woods, which anybody who hunts New York understands how hard it is to even see a black bear up in the big woods in the Adirondacks.
Sure. Yeah.
So, but that was it. So hunting's been passion for that long, passing it on to my kids. I'm fortunate enough I got a 21-year-old and a 17-year-old now, and since they're old enough to go in the woods with me, I would take them out hunting, and they'd sit in the tree stand. I'd show them, what to do, how to act when a deer came in, how to walk in the woods. So by the time they were 13 or 14, not much more had to be taught. They had watched me do it. They had learned, and just like myself, they had grown up in hunting, and it was, it was just what you do
Yeah.
in the Harvey family in particular. And so, it's been a lot of fun. And then just the link between Brian Davis and myself, we're both, he's prior active Army, and we're both in the Army National Guard together. We started working together about 5 years ago and shared our passion of hunting, being office partners.
Yeah. So you guys
Yes.
worked here, or was it in Syracuse?
No, right here in Geneseo.
Okay.
Yep. So both of us were office partners, and it took about 5 minutes to figure out that we were big outdoorsmen. And he's more of a big woods hunter. His lineage is hunting the Adirondacks, even though he's hunted down here plenty. So once he found out about our Adirondack bear hunt, that's when Brian, I invited him along, and I was like, this guy's a perfect fit for our hunting group and my family and friends. And so he started going with us probably about 3 years ago.
3 years ago, yeah.
Yeah, 3 years ago, our annual September bear hunting trip in the mountains. So, that's kind of where the passion came together. And from there, all of a sudden we started talking about going out west to Colorado. So
Yeah.
I guess I can let Brian take it from there.
Yeah, for sure. But before Brian goes, it's kind of funny listening to you talk about because when you got back into hunting was when you came home from the Marines.
Yeah.
And that's really because how much younger are you than Dad?
Probably about 8 or 9 years.
Yeah,
younger.
so it's funny because when you came home, like you were super young. And I remember looking at you, like Jimmy and I were probably 8, 10 years old, maybe.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I
And
remember
it was
that.
like we were infatuated with Uncle Chris, and then but like we always looked at you as being like this great big hunter, but you were really just getting started and being serious about it.
Yeah, really getting serious about it. I had a learning curve.
Yeah.
Because imagine taking 8 years off. And when I did as a teenager, it was just something you went out in the woods, open a day, you went out Thanksgiving morning. I didn't study it with a passion.
Listening to some of your guys' stories, I think that it was a secondary.
Yeah.
It was more of a get together and a party than it was.
Yes,
Hunting.
the early days might have enjoyed a few beers the night before,
Right.
and we'd go out and hunt. But I didn't study the deer. I didn't study whitetail until I came home, and then it became serious passion. So I did have a learning curve
Yeah.
at age 29 to really get out there. But I remember taking you and your brother out. You guys were little, and I took you out to build that tree stand.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah,
Out in the sheep pasture.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And I had you guys climb up in there. I basically took wood and a hammer and a saw, and we
Yeah,
built.
looking back, maybe not the safest operation with a couple of young kids, but
But yeah, it's cool to see you now. As much as you're into hunting, and you and Jimmy and you guys are phenomenal hunters. It's fun to see the family lineage.
Yeah.
Throughout the generations. But yeah, it was a learning curve for me.
yeah.
But it's been a passion once you get into it. And I think there's a difference between hunting when you're 17 and when you're 30 years old.
Yeah.
And I think everybody here, you guys can contest to that. There's a different maturity to it, what you see in it. I don't shoot everything that comes by anymore. I'm more selective. I really enjoy being in the woods, and I want a certain type of hunting experience.
Yeah.
I won't take a shot unless I'm sure it's going to be a clean kill. In the younger days, I would see a deer, and I would shoot at it with my shotgun with iron sights, and 80% of the time put it down. But I learned from experience that's not always the way to do it. So I pretty much just hunt with a muzzleloader now during gun season. So I have one shot, and that one shot has to count. And
Much more selective.
it is, and I enjoy hunting more with that challenge. Kind of like a bow, you got one shot, you got to make it count.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's. That's my background. Obviously, people will discover, with our group, we're very passionate about hunting. Sometimes, maybe a little obsessed.
Depends on who you ask.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But God bless our wives; they stick with us
Yeah.
through these things. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. The deer cutting group we do. Our little meat cutting union organization we've had for 30 years, where we all get together and cut deer. It's a social aspect too.
It is.
Throughout season.
Yeah. So Brian, your turn. I know we just talked for 30 minutes and you recorded your first podcast without knowing, but
That's all right.
Yeah.
That's all right.
let's give us a little rundown of
first,
like Chris did.
First thing is, thanks for having me on. I hope Pert Near Outdoors takes off. I'm glad to see a local group of people establish a platform here for New York hunters. So I'm Brian Davis. I grew up not too far from Geneseo here in Leroy, New York. I grew up a family of 3 boys, so I'm the youngest of the 3 boys. went to school, graduated right there in Leroy, New York, and
You're in a whacking night?
A whacking night, that's right.
No longer,
that's
right?
So,
they had to do away with that, didn't they?
I had heard that.
I think they're like the
But they
Red
merged
Crusaders
with,
or something.
They merged some sports with another school district, so I think they did, some of the sports they took away the whacking night
Yeah,
mascot, yeah. It's unfortunate.
it's a shame.
But,
I digress.
So, yeah, I just, like you guys, like the Harvey family, I came from a hunting family. My father and mother grew up in the eastern part of New York State, in a small town called St. Johnsville, which is a little east of Utica, between Utica and Albany.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandfather and a bunch of his buddies back in the 40s established a hunting club in the Adirondacks. And that's really where I grew up knowing hunting, was hunting the big woods of the Adirondacks. I hunted with my father because he wanted to expand his hunting efforts when he moved out here to Rochester area after getting a job at Kodak back in the 70s when it was booming.
Mm-hmm.
So he expanded his hunting season in the southern tier of New York, because New York is divided into two tiers,
Right.
northern and southern. And of course he took us along with him in the southern zone. So for years and years, probably as long as I can remember, I was going up to our hunting camp in the Adirondacks, in the southern foothills of the Adirondacks. So, 7 or 8 years old, we were going up with, the red and black checkered plaid wool jackets, and, stuff, rubber boots that were
Sitka gear or
two
first
sizes
light
too big for us,
Right.
Just put an extra pair of socks on, you'll be fine,
Right.
And I'll tell you, it really, I grabbed a hold of it with two hands, and out of my two brothers and I was probably the most passionate hunter out of the three of us. To the point to where I became 14, I was either 14 or 15, I was the very first one in my family that got into bow hunting. I begged and pleaded with my father and mother to get me a bow for Christmas. I wanted to get into archery hunting and expand my seasons. I just fell in love with deer hunting. And eventually on my 15th birthday, my father bought a used bear bow from one of his coworkers. And I just practiced in the backyard. I with my own money, I was working part-time with a local farm market. I bought a couple bales of hay from the farmer, and I was just shooting 10, 15, 20 yards in my backyard. So that's where my archery hunting experience took off. From there, when I graduated high school, I went into the military, active duty Army. I spent 5 years in the active duty Army, served in Fort Benning, Georgia, and then served 3 years overseas in Germany.
Okay.
When my 5 years was over, I ultimately got out of the military, returned back to the States, got married in 2007, and I just missed being in uniform. So I returned back to the Army National Guard 1 weekend a month as a part-time soldier, still working construction when I returned to the States. And then ultimately heard about a full-time National Guard job locally right here in Geneseo, working for the recruiting command. So that's where Chris and I kind of attached to one another.
Your guys' story is like exactly the same.
It's
Very
pretty close. It's
That's
pretty
crazy.
close.
We both have a career in construction. Our hiatus between active duty and going active duty guard, so similar that we were both construction foremen for
That's
almost
crazy.
8 or 9 years.
To piggyback off of Chris, it literally took us 5 or 10 minutes after becoming office partners. I was awarded the job here in Geneseo as his office partner. He was already on board, but it didn't take us very long to identify that we were going to establish a friendship outside of work.
Right.
Yeah.
I can see why. That's crazy.
In recruiting, recruiting in any branch of the military or any sales job is tough. And we knew Octobers and Novembers were going to be very challenging
Right.
of
With
who
deer
was going to be
season.
in the office, who
Yeah.
wasn't going to be in the office.
Right.
So,
Our numbers weren't the
But,
best.
and,
It's the
You know,
rut, sir.
that's really my backstory. I'm married now. I live, 8 miles away from Geneseo in a small town, Mount Morris, New York. I'm married, a wife and 3 children, stepdaughter at 20 years old, and then I have 2 boys, 17 and 12. So just like Chris with his 2 boys, it's fun to pass on the lineage and the family's traditions, and to bring new traditions into my lifestyle with going on your guys' family, bear hunt, and stuff like that. I try not to take away from my family traditions, going to the Adirondacks and stuff like that. And I always bust Chris's balls like, oh, you got to come up to our hunting camp, But he's got so many hunting traditions that
I know,
he
right?
takes part in.
And tradition's so important to all of us
It
that
is,
you.
It is. I was unfortunate
Like,
not to be able to meet your grandfather and
Yeah.
Chris's father, but I could almost envision him envision him just like my grandfather and my grandfather's friends, where it's just about camaraderie. It really is. It's about conservation. It's about camaraderie, getting a group of guys or group of gals together and just having a good time. Whether you harvest something or not is kind of irrelevant. Obviously, everybody wants to harvest an animal. We want to put food on the table because that's what we believe in as hunters. We want to put food on the table for our families, but it's all about teamwork and passion for each other and just being around people that have the same ideologies and mindsets that we have.
Right.
And to pass it on to my kids it's awesome.
Yeah.
It's just awesome.
Yeah, you and I were chatting about it in the truck, seeing, obviously I grew up, really with David and Joe, my Uncle Chris's 2 boys. So when you moved home, David was, a year old or 2 years old?
About a year or 2 old.
But I got to watch those boys grow up just as you got to watch Jimmy and I grow up.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting, kind of like flipped in reverse to see, Dave and Joe going through their progressions, and Joe, we're gonna get the 2 of them on here at some point to
Yeah.
do something because that'd be a riot. But like
Get the deer slayer on.
Deer slayer.
they're so much like Jimmy, my brother and I, Jimmy and I,
Sure.
because I was focused on sports and the social life and all that, so much like David and going to school. And Joe is just identical to Jimmy, where it was like, if it's the weekend, I am at camp, I'm doing firewood, I'm working on tree stands, I'm going hunting.
Yeah.
Like, that's
I
the
have
priority.
2 of the same. My
Yeah.
my oldest boy Jordan he's a woodsman through and through. Loves to do stuff with his hands. If he's got 5 minutes to spend in the woods or outdoors, he's outdoors. Cooper's in that younger generation. He's 12, where he's slower progressing into the hunting industry, but he's coming around, and not like I try not to pressure him. I get feedback from my wife all the time. He doesn't have to go if he doesn't want to go. But it's just I wouldn't want to force him into a situation, but I see the joy on his face when he's up north in the camp with the guys and stuff like that. And just we make him feel like one of the guys up there. At a young age. And that's what I had at a young age.
Yeah.
Just like I'm sure you guys
We all
did
did, yeah.
when you guys went to your
Yeah,
camps, right?
my dad included my brother and I in everything, and that was.
I try to portray that, to my wife, where, if you could just see him for 5 or 10 minutes when he's in camp with the boys.
Yeah.
He
when
acts like he's 25.
Yeah.
He does.
Well, especially.
There's something to developing young men and young women. But, a lot of young men, they go hunting. When I say young men, that could be 8, 10, 12, 14 years old. So many kids in society are missing out on this, about learning about the outdoors. And people who don't hunt, they think we just want to go out and slaughter animals and indiscriminately. That's not the case. It's about time sitting around the cabin and having some venison stew and everybody cracking jokes. And it's all good values. There's so many good lessons to be learned there. and about, going outside when it's cold out.
Doing hard stuff, being
hard
uncomfortable.
stuff.
Yeah.
Like I can remember a couple years ago, I took Joe up. We did a late season muzzleloader hunt down in Naples at camp, and Mike was there. Your Uncle Mike, Jimmy was there. Can't remember if you were there for that one. I think you came the next day, but we were there like on a Saturday. Now I'm telling you what, there was about 18 inches of snow. It was about 10 degrees out.
Yep, I remember that day. It was snowing.
Yeah, the hunt never ended. Like, we were going to go back for lunch. On our way back from lunch, we saw a nice buck. We shot at it. It ran straight up this hill that we could barely climb up. Went up on top to Mike and Jimmy. This turned into a hunt where, like, all of us were out of water, or else our water was frozen in our canteens. And I remember us meeting on top of the hill. We finally met with these guys. And at the meantime, my brother Mike had shot a different buck. We're up there, standing there in the woods talking. It's about 3 p.m, 10 degrees out. And it was so cold out, we were scooping up snow. We were so thirsty that we were like eating snow. And
it wasn't yellow snow, was it?
No, thank God. Thank God for that. But that probably would have worked as well, too. But we had to
sterile,
survive.
and I like the taste of it.
But that's the funny part. You're tough. You're out there. And then we went back to camp. It was dark. And I had to go home that night. Of course, my son Joe was like 14 or 15 at the time. He stayed the night. And the next day they went out again. Mm-hmm. He came home that night and he had shot a doe. But he's like, oh, it was awesome. We were out all day. We never back for lunch. We didn't have any food or water. But there's not many 14-year-olds in a high school you'll find that got that grit.
No.
They're not, too many are glued to the video games or their cell phones. To go out and just navigate the woods. And, my uncles and you guys, they didn't baby my kids up there. They'd stick Joe in a tree stand and be like, hey, we're coming back for you in 3 hours. There's not even cell service in many of the areas we hunt. So it teaches a lot of like inner strength, woodsman skills. And so young men and women, I think, are great to be exposed to this type of thing.
Yeah.
Sure.
Nothing bad is going to come from it. That's my opinion.
I mean, I look at Uncle Mike with Tracy. Most of my cousins were boys, but Uncle Mike had Tracy up there, and she was not there. That was unique. She was not there to shoot anything. She was there to be with all of us and to be with Uncle Mike, and she got so much enjoyment out of being with Uncle Mike. And all those opportunities where they had turkeys in close, they had deer in close, and Uncle Mike wanted so bad for her to shoot one, but that's not what it was about to him either. It was that experience with his daughter, and now she's off to college and she's doing her thing, and who knows what she may come back to. And I think that's the same thing with myself. Hunting was never the top priority, but once I graduated from college, sports were a past part of my life, and then it's like hunting. It's my wife, work, hunting, that's your primary keys. And I'm sure David, as much as he comes back for those key opening days and the Thanksgiving, he'll be back. He'll find that when he's past that point in his life. But when I think it's great to have, David is so motivated by the school and education and being a very, very good cross-country skier. He's committed to that. Sure. And you can't have all these you can't be an archery hunter and a really good cross-country skier. It's one or the other. Like, they don't.
Unless you're Cam Haynes.
Right.
That's highly unusual to be a top-level athlete and a top-level hunter. But, I never force hunting. And, I want to add that when my kids were little, I never had to force them out of the house. They wanted to go with Dad. They couldn't wait for the minute to go with Dad because, they emulate, their parents and their father. And they'd see me go on the weekends or go on a morning hunt on a Saturday and come back at 10 or 11 o'clock with all these stories. So it was never an issue to get David or Joe out in the woods with me. I mean, I would usually, that's when I started buying ladder stands. I started with blinds. We'd hunt from the ground. And here's one thing about kids, for all you parents out there where your kids are little. Your kids will see more deer than you do. Mark my words.
Absolutely.
You will think you're the best hunter in the world. You take an 8-year-old out there with you, and I'm amazed how good their eyes are.
Yeah.
Every time I take Joe or Dave out, they would spot deer. They would spot animals, and you think okay, there's nothing over there. And they're like, Dad, there's a deer. And you look, and you're like, holy cow. There's a deer like 200 yards away, and their ear's sticking out, and somehow they see it. So it's a good thing. Take your kids out, because I guarantee they will see animals before you will.
It's a ton of fun.
Yeah.
It's nothing more rewarding than taking your son or daughter out hunting.
They have a ton of fun. They're learning so much.
Yep.
Learned so much.
Sometimes they got to plug their ears. They're afraid of the gunshots.
Right.
We went through that phase.
Yeah. Speaking of that, the one story, we were hunting with Dad. Jimmy and I were, speaking of plugging your ears and guns, it was a safe shot. Okay, I'll lead with that. But we're still hunting across the top of the South Hill, and Uncle Mike, we were kind of paralleling him, and there was some brush in between, and this buck snuck behind. Dad was constantly turning around and looking because of the way the wind was going. He was paying attention because a buck might smell us and try to, sneak behind. So sure enough, he turns around, and Jimmy and I are like right on his hip, and I think Jimmy was in front of me, I was behind Jimmy, and Dad turned around and saw this buck sneaking, and he's like, "Get down, boys!" And we both get right down, and I guess he was over the top of us, and he shot this buck and just drilled the thing. Like, he shot it dumped immediately. And I remember I turned around and I punched Jimmy so hard, like square in the chest. I'm like, I was so jacked up. I punched him square in the chest. And Jimmy's, this was before we had our licenses, so it had to be like 10, 12, somewhere in there.
Old, yeah.
And Jimmy, anybody that knows my brother and I, like, my defense mechanism with Jimmy's a year and a half younger than me.
He's a big boy.
Well, he's a big boy. He wasn't always big, but he was, Dad and I were always roughhousing with him and beating him, so he's tough. And I hit him, and he freaking walloped me back, and I couldn't run because that was my normal mechanism. Is like, I hit Jimmy or I do something, and I just take off running as fast as I can. He'd never catch me.
Yeah.
I'm just running zigzags and gets all dizzy and tips over. But
those are the stories that bring you back.
yeah, and that was so much fun.
We all got 100 million of them.
That was probably the only time. I'm sure there's been another time, but when Jimmy and I were both with Dad when he shot a buck. And it was a nice 7-point, and it was an awesome shot, and this was before 4-wheelers, and we're 1.5 miles from camp on top of the mountain, and then it's that memorial drag back, so
Sure.
You're dragging that deer through 1.5 feet of snow, freezing cold out, no cell phones, no 4-wheelers, like that was awesome. Those sort of stories just bring you back. But all right, so I want to real quick hit on just briefly on that bear hunt the first year you joined us up in the Adirondacks. So that would have been 2016, maybe. It had to have been 16.
Might have been 15.
2015.
Was it that long ago?
2015.
Yeah, that was my first year not working here. I was working in Syracuse.
That was the very first year.
Yeah, because you guys were up there early, but it was so funny because I've been on maybe 6 or 8 of the bear hunts over my hunting age to be going. That bear hunt had so much energy in that camp. Like, everybody was fired up.
Well, that was it. I think that was the first one at Tim's camp.
It was the first one at Tim's camp.
First one at Tim's camp.
You were there. You were like my first impression of you was like, this guy is wound up on everything. Like, you're just like, yeah, I'm all jacked up. But then we had Brian and Dallas, and it was their first time ever hunting with our crew.
That's right.
And we hunted hard and we partied hard.
We played hard too.
Oh my God. Like, that was some of the wildest time. And it was like, I'll never forget that hunt. I think you saw a bear on the last day.
Brian was the only one to see.
You were covering some serious ground.
We saw some bear scat. The cherries weren't as good that year, which was prominently what we were hunting over. And I ended up spotting a bear in, I guess it was wild blueberry patch. I guess there's some type of blueberry that grows up there.
Yeah.
In those swales and bogs and stuff up there. But it was a decent sized bear. I'll be honest with you, hunting in the Adirondacks with the hunting club that I hunt with, we talked about this in the truck a little bit, but we've never hunted as a club specifically for bear.
Yeah.
It's always an opportunity harvest if we happen to see one, during deer season. So that was my very first bear hunt, was when I went with you guys. And I had only seen 2 bears in my lifetime.
No kidding.
Besides that, one year it was during deer season. I just couldn't get a good shot. And then the other time was during turkey season, and they were out of season.
Yeah.
So, every dark brown stump to a non-bear hunter looks like a bear, you know? Until you physically see one.
Yeah, pretty quick when you actually see one.
It is, without hesitation, the most distinct thing that you can spot in the woods. And I come up over the crest of this hill, I probably went, 2.5 miles from
That
the
was
trail.
you did a huge loop that day.
Yeah.
You were
3
like, yeah,
miles,
I'm gonna do
somewhere
this
around
after
there.
lunch, and we're all like, Jesus, you know how far that is, and how thick that is.
A lot of guys
It's
were
like, yeah,
nervous.
no problem.
Like, a lot of guys were nervous, but it's never been a thing for me. Is hunting in the big woods is, I can get around with a map and a compass. I had a map, and with the water features and the terrain features that were around was not a huge issue for me. But when I saw the bear, at first I just thought it was one of those big dark stumps, and then I think the bear ended up winding me. By the time I identified it was a bear, when I pulled the gun up, I could not identify what part of the bear I was looking at.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have a clear enough shot in my mind to pull the trigger.
Yeah.
Until, in hindsight, looking back, the bear actually was on its hind legs, pulling berries off the top of this bush.
No kidding.
And then when it went down on all fours, it disappeared down over top of this little ledge.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, I knew where I was looking at on the bear, and then I didn't have a good shot.
Yeah.
So, I was a little disappointed, but when I got
At least you
back,
saw one.
Yeah, that
when
hunt.
I got back,
You see a bear, that's a victory.
I was completely disappointed. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe this. I blew my opportunity. And then being on my first bear hunt and seeing a bear, but not harvesting it, I was disappointed until I got back and linked up with the rest of the guys.
We celebrated that.
And they were
That's
like,
sighting
you
big
guys-
time.
Celebrity.
You guys were like, oh my God, you seen a bear? Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's a feat in of itself,
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, it's not really a big deal. Like I saw a bear, but when I went up again, that's when I realized, and then I kind of contemplated to myself, out of all the years that I've been hunting, especially in the Adirondack region,
Right.
I've only seen 2 bears. That's being the third. So it's like,
It's rare.
How many
Okay,
years?
so
That's
it's
like 20 plus years.
20 plus years of hunting.
Right. That's insane.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
I guess it is kind of a big deal, you
Yeah.
know? I
Yeah.
said to myself. So it was a great trip. I was on cloud 9 the
Yeah.
entire time.
That's what's so fun about sharing, like going on those trips and meeting new people. Because you're like, I'm sitting back from afar, and I'm bringing Dallas and Brian, and those guys I'm very close with. That's my wife's family, and I hunt with them a lot. Probably more than anybody right now. And I so badly wanted to get them to experience hunting with our family. But you're kind of nervous, like, are they going to fit in with the guys? Is everybody going to get along?
Sure.
And then you're new, and it's like, well, what's this guy all about? If Uncle Chris
Yeah.
likes him, he must be all right.
Yeah.
But like, you take just 2.5 days.
Yeah, and
And
you're all good
in
friends.
2.5 days, all of a sudden it's like, now you're friends with Dallas. You're running into him down in
Yeah.
Down in
Letchworth.
Letchworth, yeah,
it's like
it's
now
funny.
it's like in
Oh, my
2.5 days, all of a sudden you make like these friends. It's like, oh yeah, like let's go on a hunt together sometime.
Yeah.
Like, how the hell that happened?
It's funny
Like, you're
because
where else
I
can you
think-
go and do that?
I think it was 2 years later. I was hunting. I was at a trailhead in Letchworth, and I happened to be coming. My son Jordan and I were coming out of the trail, and there's I don't know. I'd say 80, 90, maybe 100 feet of roadside that you can see the trailhead. So when a car passed by, you had pretty good visual of the trailhead when you drove by for
Yeah.
a few seconds. And this Subaru or some car drives
got a
by. It's
Ford
like
Escape.
It's like a
Yeah.
SUV, small SUV type vehicle,
Yeah.
right? Goes flying by, and all of a sudden you can hear the car stop and go in reverse. It's like going in reverse, And it's Dallas. He
Yeah.
stopped by. He's like, "Oh, I recognize you're coming on the trailhead. How'd you make out?" But it was like, just like you say, it's you hunt with somebody for 2.5, 3 days,
Yeah.
and you make a relationship with a person. It's unbelievable the friendships and the acquaintances that you meet over the years. It's just a great feeling.
Mhm.
It's a great feeling.
Yeah. And that's why
It's a
I'm
ton of fun.
That's why I'm excited to do this podcast and to sit down with even some of the people that are closest to me. Because I think you sit down and you have some more, like, you dive into some conversations deeper when you can sit down and actually, like, peel the onion back and
Sure.
see what's going on there. Because you've been my uncle since I was born. That's just how it
Yeah.
works. But we're talking about things that we never would have sat down and had a conversation about.
Right.
So I think it's just super interesting, and that's exactly why we want to do this podcast, is because I think that there's stories that come out of this, there's lessons that come out of it that interest me, and I'm sure they interest you guys. And I think the more and more people you talk to, it's trying to get that same. There's other people out there thinking the same things, doing the same things, and having maybe those same relationships with people they're around, and encouraging people to get into it and get your hunting license and go out and go to it. Like Brian and I were talking about backcountry hunters and anglers before you got here. We were out in the truck, and it's like for someone new that's getting into hunting to even start to build some of those relationships like we all did on that bear hunt for 2.5 days. It's like, how do you even meet that group of people to start?
Where do you start?
So I know people right now. I can think of 2 people right now that live an hour and a half from me, just through work association, that want to hunt. And I honestly wish they lived closer to me. I mean, one of them told me the other day that he has a bow, but his family never hunted, but he wants to hunt. He doesn't know where to start. That makes me want to drive out there with this guy and, hey, I'll take you out. I'll show you, because they weren't out there with their parents when they were 8 or 9 years old. So I think sometimes we forget. There's a lot of people. They could be 18, 19, 20. They could be 30 years old, and they want to get into. And I know you got your friend into hunting. You told that story.
Yeah.
I think on the East to West podcast. But there's a lot of people out there. I think we have to be mentors as well. Besides our kids, if we find somebody who wants to hunt, it's not an exclusive club. And sometimes I see outdoorsmen, everybody, they feel like they're elite. Like, well, I only shoot big bucks, or I only do this, or I only do that. Hunting is for everybody. And some people getting a big doe might be their trophy. Somebody getting a little 6-point. We should never segregate, against hunters. So it's important that if we find somebody who wants to hunt, we should really bring them into the flock, take them out and teach them, because if nobody's taught them, how do they know?
And that's the future of our sport, is getting these people into it.
It's declining.
We've got to add. So, and that's where, I think I just keep coming back to backcountry hunters and anglers, because you go to these events. I went to, I'm assuming the guy lives in Syracuse area. I went to that pint night in Syracuse that they did back in, it was April or May, somewhere, and I planned my whole work week around it. I went and worked in Albany, and I drove home, and I stopped there on my way home that night, and I met some awesome people. I met some father and son that they go out to Montana and elk hunt every year, and it's like you just start within like 2.5 hours. All of a sudden, you just meet all these people, and there was a couple of people that were there. You could tell that were by themselves, and this guy, he's just getting into hunting, and he's hunting this little block of public land that's just down the road from his house, but he hasn't had any luck yet. He's trying to figure it out. But it's like you go to an event like that and you meet those type of people, and it's a very open, comfortable environment to be in, and give those people an opportunity to build some knowledge, build some of those relationships. But back to your point about taking someone out, Brian and I were talking about it in the truck. It's like, even if it's just one day out of the entire season, it could be a half a day. Yeah. Just go out and just walk the woods with them. Sure. And to us, it's like we were doing that before we were even old enough to hunt.
Exactly.
But these folks, wherever they come from, whatever their age is, they don't even know what to look for.
They don't.
And you can't get that from watching a TV show. You can't. Like, they're not going to go through, okay, we're walking through the woods. Here's a deer trail. Here's some scat.
No, they never cover that.
No.
The TV shows.
You can't, because you got to get to the point,
Exactly. But there's times like when you walk through the woods, and if you actually still hunt, if you still hunt around and take 10 paces and stop and look around. I've done that before for hours on end, like especially at hunting camp down in Naples. It's exhausting because every step, do you feel a stick under your foot? Are you trying to be quiet? There's a different way than walking around Walmart or walking around a grocery store.
Right.
And that stuff, like you said, I used to teach my kids. You turn around and you're like, stop stepping on sticks.
Yeah, you're dragging your feet.
Yeah, you're dragging your feet. Pick your feet up.
Yeah.
One thing I taught my kids is when I stop, they stop. So, and we all do that. I could hunt with either one of you guys right now. And if you guys were in front of me and we're walking and you guys come to a dead stop, I'm freezing. I mean, it's almost like in the military we do that too, like on, if you're on a patrol. But like my kids now, I can take them out and they know if I stop, they stop and I probably see something, and everybody literally freezes. And then you might use hand signals pointing out, okay, there's a deer. Or if I take a knee, then those behind me will take a knee. And I would do the same. There's just something about learning to move yourself in the woods.
Yep.
And become part of the woods and not disturb it. So animals, you're not just, crashing through, scaring everything off. There's an art to that people don't talk about.
Yeah.
It's hard. Being a mentor takes, we make it sound like it takes years and years. And to a certain extent, it does take years and years. But like you guys say, those people that want to get into hunting, they need that initial push, that initial mentor to show them just those initial woodsmanship skills. And it's going to take them years to fine tune them, I guess, just as it did for all of us.
Yep.
And our mentors that showed us the way. But we, as I've done more research, as I've gotten into Western hunting over the last 3 or 4 years, and have done more research and listened to more, and as my kids have gotten into hunting more, I've kind of changed my mindset of I need to make myself more available to organizations around. Like tonight we were talking about BHA, for instance, right? I didn't even know that it existed. But I for sure, in future months and years to come, I definitely, I'm looking forward to the end of September this month.
That's part of the deal. If you come on this podcast, you have got to become a member of Backcountry Hunters.
I got to check it out.
I definitely will. And
I'm not kidding.
I look forward
Oh,
to
arm
the end of the
wrestling.
month. I'm taking my
You both might whip my ass.
taking my
But
12-year-old to his hunter safety course, the firearm hunter safety course. So, we're members down at the Dansville Fish and Game Club. So I'm definitely going to reach out to the committee members down there to try to get myself more involved. And it's hard. It's hard being a military member in the organization that we're in because we're super busy. We have super late nights. But like you say, we are the future leaders and mentors of this industry. And if we don't pass on what we've learned, it's going to go away.
yeah.
Slowly it will die.
Like your fathers did, my grandfather did to me, my father did.
Correct.
And it's like, okay, now the
There's
roles
fewer
are
and
developing.
fewer of
Yeah.
us than
There
were
is.
20, 30 years ago.
Something has changed, and I don't know what it is. I honestly can't tell you what happened, but I can remember, I'm 50 years old, so I can remember, 30, 35 years ago when opening day was on a Monday, and like you didn't show up to work, you didn't show up to school, and there was no repercussions. I remember that.
Yeah.
I remember in high school, they're like, oh, okay, it's opening day. It was always on a Monday. It was like a national holiday. Every diner was open at 4 a.m. It was a big deal. And, same with later in life when I came back and I was working construction. I remember the owner of the company, he would get a roster, okay, who's not going to be here Monday? Because he was a hunter himself. There was no problem. He just knew it. Okay, we're going to be missing. Sometimes we shut the whole company down on that Monday because 70% of the personnel were out hunting.
Yeah.
So, I guess over time things changes. I think not as many people have taken their kids out because I guess that's what we're getting back to. And not everybody has to be interested in hunting. It's not a big deal.
No.
But sometimes during the fall, October, November, I honestly don't know what other people do, like what excites them, besides football.
Hay rides, pumpkin spice lattes,
you could do that.
things like that. Yeah.
You can do the hay ride, and you can.
I enjoy those things
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, don't admit
I
that.
enjoy them if it doesn't interrupt my hunt.
Yeah, if
Only
you're doing a
because my
hay
wife
ride
says
looking
I
for
have-
deer,
Only because my
Yeah.
wife says I
Yeah.
have to enjoy
Yeah.
those once in a while
I-
in hunt season.
you're a better man. than
I
am.
always tell my wife, I'm like, this is my favorite time of the year. Like, I'm so excited right now. When the leaves start to change, from now until, December, 2 weeks before Christmas, whenever muzzleloader ends, deer season. It's nonstop hunting every weekend with family, cutting deer every week with family. It's so much fun every year. So many new memories are built.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what's what do people do? I mean, how do they get excited in October when they see the leaves falling? How do they not think about the rut?
They don't know about it. That's why they're not excited.
How can you not be excited to get in a tree stand
I
on
know.
November 5th or 6th? And you could see a buck you've never seen before chasing a doe. There's times I've seen 5 bucks in one hunt in an hour, running around chasing does. Some of the most exciting experiences I've ever had. And I just, but to each their own, and I get it,
Yeah.
Some people probably think we're goofy for sitting in a tree or walking around the woods for a couple hours, but man, they're missing out. I think if we took them out and gave them a taste of it, they would love it.
Yeah. So let's kind of start getting into discussing the Western stuff that's coming up here for us. That's the big
Okay.
topic of conversation. So real quick, highlight your hunt last year, Brian, because I was the first one, and our Uncle Tim had gone on some guided hunts out west.
He did a New Mexico and a Montana elk.
And he's always done guided style hunts. And so after I went on my mule deer hunt there in 2017 with the Kirsch family, and we went on that hunt. We had an incredible hunt. We shot 3 mule deer, and I came home, and I can remember, opening day at our deer camp, and I'm showing these pictures all you guys, and
Sure.
you could feel everybody starting to be like, okay, I think we need to start looking at doing this. If little Billy over here can do it, anybody can do it.
Well, you showed that it's a possibility.
Yeah.
Sometimes you see it as a pipe dream because, I can't afford a $5,000 guided hunt. But after you did that, that's when I started discussions. And I'm like, we're good hunters. Why can't we just drive out and do it yourself?
Right.
Which leads to what you and Brian have done.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me, I'll be honest with you, to bring it all, to reverse the clock, my 2018 hunt all stemmed off of Chris. So one day we got chit-chatting in the office, and he said, we should plan an elk hunt, archery elk hunt for 2019. I said, I'm in. Let's do it. So of course me, I'm a visual learner, so I came up with the bright idea of, I think I'm going to go on a scouting adventure in 2018
I remember you
for our big group that's going in 2019.
You called me in I don't know if it was June. It was right before my son was born. You're like, hey, Billy, what are you up to? You interested in going to Colorado in September? I'm like, dude, I got a baby coming any day now,
I
and
couldn't
my wife.
buy a hunting partner
No.
back then.
So let's dive into it. So you decided pretty late that you were going to go out
did.
there.
I didn't decide
It was
until
February 2018 is when we proposed the
when-
idea.
Yeah, we had
we
that big
talked
family
about it.
meeting, and
We did.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I didn't decide to go out for the quote unquote scouting trip until probably March or April. So I was very behind the power curve. I've always dreamed of going out west. My father and my 2 brothers went out west years and years ago to hunt mule deer in 2002, and they were successful. But I'm a big passionate bow hunter, more so than rifle, and I've always wanted to archery hunt elk. So I was all in. I said, you know what, this is something I'm going to do. I'm going to use Billy Harvey to my advantage because he went out there. They had a heck of a mule deer hunt. They actually saw some elk on, I don't know, what was it, the 3rd or 4th or 5th day?
We saw elk the whole time. Yeah, it was.
And like Chris said, I couldn't afford a $4,000 or $6,000 guided hunt. So my son Jordan and I talked about it. I tried getting Chris on board, and he just couldn't afford 2 years in a row.
Yeah.
So kind of off the cuff, I asked my then office partner, Joe Coburn, if he was interested in, he was an archery hunter, an archery whitetail hunter. So, off the cuff, I asked him, I'm like, hey, you interested in going on an archery elk hunt? And of course he was, man, I thought you would never ask me. You've been talking about it for months and months.
Yeah.
So that was the 3 of us that went out. We went it was opening weekend. So it was the very last 3 or 4 days of the month of August, 2018.
I
to,
forgot you went before
Southern
September
Colorado.
even.
So we ended up leaving on September 1st. So we were there early season, opening weekend. It was hot. And, long story short, we had no idea what we were doing, with the exception of doing some research and podcast listening, YouTube video watching, things of that nature. We were on some forums, downloaded Onyx map application to our smart devices. It didn't really, we just figured we were going to use what woodsmanships we had, and ultimately it was a scouting adventure. And it turns out that we were successful on the hunt. I shot a cow elk on the first day. So it, we arrived on the morning, it was a Sunday when we arrived, Sunday morning. And a buddy of mine from the active duty Army lives in Colorado Springs. I haven't seen him in 20 years. He drove 2.5 hours to come and see. I posted it all over social media that I was going on an elk hunt, archery elk hunt, do-it-yourself backpack hunt. And of course he's like, when are you going to be in Colorado? I live, where are you going? So it was nice. We actually linked up with him. We had breakfast before we got to the trailhead. So the adventure started immediately. Just driving across America was something I've never done before. There's so much. I've seen things overseas, and I'm grateful for that, but there's so much more in the states of America that I have not seen, that just driving through Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana,
cornfields,
Missouri, Kansas.
I'm looking forward to that.
Yes, yeah, it's cornfields, but we drove through St. Louis where the arches are.
Yeah, so you guys went a little bit different route than we did.
So
yeah.
we took Interstate 70 all the way out until we got to the western edge of Kansas, and then we went to this right along the New Mexico border of Colorado.
Yeah.
This is where we hunted, so we cut the corner off there before you hit Denver on I-70. But we got to the trailhead after having breakfast with my buddy Scott, and we verified our bows and stuff in the trailhead, and there was we arrived on a Sunday, there was 11 trucks, including my truck. There was 11 trucks and livestock trailers in the trailhead.
No kidding.
And this is a small area. This is probably, for out west, it's a small area. This is 15,000 acre, state land parcel, which is small for out there. And we hiked in about a mile and a half, and we made camp. We set up a base camp right along the trail going in. We went out that evening, did some glassing, saw a ton of mule deer.
Did you?
We didn't have mule deer tags, so that was unfortunate. But we didn't hear any elk bugling or anything, so we hiked back to base camp. We stayed the night, woke up early the next morning, and we were kind of just still hunting, getting to know the topography. And we were hunting a tabletop mesa, and we decided to go to the top. So we went from 7,800 feet to about 9,500 feet in elevation gain. So that was an experience.
Yeah.
We didn't know how we were going to do with the elevation gain and stuff like that, and we did fine. My son Jordan did great.
And he was 16 at the time?
He was 16 at the time.
Yeah.
Was right behind us
That's
every
awesome.
step of the way. I didn't purchase him a license because we didn't know what we were getting ourselves into.
Right. Well, it's not
we
exactly like buying a $100 license. I mean,
we had no idea, right?
Yeah.
So, and we were on the tabletop mountain for, I don't know, probably a mile or so, and then this one ravine that looked real good, where the timber was, just through the research and stuff that we'd done, we were able to make our way down this small little drainage, little tiny 3-foot cliffs that we were able to work our way down. And we bumped 3 cow elk. Joe saw 3 cow elk shortly after we got down into the timber from the top of the tabletop. And that's where we saw tons and tons of fresh elk sign tracks, elk scat. I mean, there was just, it was trampled. It looked like there was cattle in there, you know what I mean? So we knew we were in a good spot. Joe had saw the elk. I never seen them, never heard them. I can't believe, you know, there was 3 or 4 cow elk, however many elk that he saw, and Jordan seen them too. And I didn't hear them. They're humongous.
Yeah.
So shortly after that, we tried doing some calling because we didn't know if there was any bulls with the cows that they saw. We didn't hear anything. We kind of knew the general vicinity of where they went off to, so we kind of stopped and regathered ourselves, looked on the map, looked on our GPS of where we thought the elk were going. And probably after about an hour, we didn't get back on them again. We didn't hear anything, no cows calling or bugling or anything like that. So we decided that we were in a good spot. There was a lot of elk sign, and this was probably about 4 o'clock, 4:30 in the afternoon. And we decided, you know what? The creek that was that went down through the middle of this drainage. Let's walk the creek back to our base camp. We'll see how long it takes us to get back, so we know that's how early we have to wake up tomorrow morning to get back up here.
Right.
Because we didn't want to walk back
The same way you came,
the tabletop, because it was about a 5-mile loop.
Yeah.
You know what we had just done. So we crossed over the creek because we looked at it'd be the eastern edge of the creek. Looked like it was a little easier walking because
Was it a creek or a crick? Because you're calling it 2 different things.
creek,
I'm confused.
creek, whatever you want to call it.
Tomato. Like Stephen L said, was there tires in it or not? Because that makes it a crick.
So as soon as we crossed over this creek or creek, whatever you want to call it, we come through a small little thicket and opened up to about a football field size meadow.
Okay.
Lots of, I think they call it skunk cabbage.
Yep.
And there happened to be a cow elk bedded down in the middle. She was sunning herself.
No kidding.
And I ranged her at about, I think she was at 55 yards, but when I shot at her, she was at 58 yards. And put the smack down on her, and we ended up, it was a good blood trail, but we ended up leaving the elk overnight. And we went back the next morning, and she had expired, and we quartered it up, and
so I'd say probably one of the
pack out. So it was
probably one of the biggest lessons from that hunt was that you guys knew you were in them, you were seeing fresh sign, but you didn't push them too hard, and then you had jumped a few, and you didn't just go right after them. You kind of
we had done enough research to where everyone, it seemed like they talked about thermals.
Yeah.
Thermals was the big thing where, the wind is usually blowing down canyons in the morning, and then as the sun rises and beats into the canyon, it changes and the thermals rise up the canyon, right? So where we had come down into the canyon, we were about midway from the top and the bottom. So at that time, the thermals were going upward. But I think where we had first discovered the elk, our wind was good, and then it was right in that time frame when the sun was starting to go down, because it was getting dark out there around 6:30, 7 o'clock-ish.
But you get to like 4:35, it starts cooling down.
It starts cooling down, right? So I think we were in the midst of that change where the thermals were dying down and the wind was going to start going back down the canyon. But that is something, once we decided we were going to go back to base camp, we were still using our puffer because we were trying to learn. We were using our smoke in the bottle, our puffer.
Right.
And when we came through that thicket, we were ducks in a row, and I just happened to be the first one in the line.
Yeah.
It wasn't planned that way or anything. But I said, I'm like, guys, stop. There's a cow elk bedded down right in front of us.
She was all by herself too.
All by herself.
No kidding.
So, I didn't check the puffer. It was I ranged her, and she was.
You were checking the rangefinder.
She was within shooting distance.
Yeah.
And she was a legal elk. You know, it's either sex over the counter elk.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, I'll be damned if I'm not shooting a cow elk in 2 weeks. I'll tell you right now.
So I was just happy to see one,
Mm-hmm.
and then it was kind of just hunter instinct took over from there. You know, I knocked an arrow, ranged her, made sure there wasn't anything in the way. Like I said, she was in the wide open. We were just coming through a thicket, so I made sure there wasn't any limbs in close proximity to my bow and myself. And she ended up looking right at it. She discovers one of us moved, and she looked over in our direction. I actually took a quartering to, almost a frontal shot, and put the arrow right between basically the thorax opening and the front shoulder bone, double lunged her, and you know, all in all, she probably went a total of 60 or 70 yards, put a couple more arrows in her, you know, because that was a big thing, watching things on YouTube and stuff like that, the Born and Raised guys, or, you know, Elk 101 guys, Hush and Crew, you know, that's something that I took from those videos, where from a whitetail standpoint, you know, you're shooting an arrow through a buck or a doe from a tree stand, and, you know, they take off running, you only get one shot typically, right?
Right.
So, you know, she stopped again probably around 60, 65 yards, and we put a couple more arrows in her, and she took off.
Yeah.
But ultimately, we found her expired the next morning. So, and that's when the work started.
Yeah.
You know, we were on cloud nine. We knew she was going to expire just by the blood trail, but it was getting dark.
And God knows
we were
if
in
you
a strange place.
Right,
Yeah,
if you
it had
kept
the
on her-
GPS, but we didn't want to push her.
Right.
Yeah.
They can go a long way when you're pumped up.
And actually, when we were tracking her, just making sure that the blood trail was decent, we jumped another animal, probably about, I would say 40 or 50 yards into the blood trail, which was across this football meadow opening that I was talking about. But you know, it definitely was an elk. It was definitely a large animal. It wasn't a deer or something smaller. It was definitely a large, big game animal. But at that point, we decided, you know, it's getting dark. We're in a strange place.
Yeah.
You know, the oak scrub out there in southern Colorado is, you know, some of it's 3 feet off the ground, some of it's 8 feet off the ground. And it's thick.
Yeah.
And it's got thorns on it. And we just, you know, I got a 16-year-old boy with me and my buddy Joe. And, you know, it's funny because we had gotten signal on top of the tabletop mountain. And we both had texted our wives that afternoon before we dropped down into the canyon, like, hey, we'll text, you know, we're going to go to town tonight, and we're going to get something to eat, you know, a good dinner, instead of eating camp food, and we'll call you from the town, because there was signal in town, you know. And, you know, lo and behold, we put an animal on the ground, and now we didn't get out to the trailhead until, I think it was between 10:30 and 11 o'clock by the time we got to the trailhead. So
Right. And that's
we
after
drove to
midnight
town.
back here, and the wives are wondering, where are the boys? Are they alive? Yeah.
So when we had called home saying, listen, we got out of the woods late because we shot an elk, I mean, they don't understand hunting, but they were,
Ecstatic.
our wives have been so supportive in all of our hunting adventures that they were ecstatic. Like, they just couldn't believe that we got it done.
Especially the first day. That's
Yeah,
just
Especially
insane.
the first day, we couldn't believe that we got it done.
Yeah, when you
You know?
text me, I was in a hotel
So-
in Albany. You're like, yeah, I got
It
it now.
was-
I'm like,
Yeah.
I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, sure you
And
did. At
It
the,
was just,
the pub.
we were on cloud nine, you know,
Yeah.
it was definitely unexpected. So the second day, Tuesday, the second full day, you know, the majority of the day was spent packing the elk out. You know, by the time we got back up to the elk, it was around 10 o'clock in the morning. So, you know, some of the sun was beating down on it. So we lost probably, I would say, about 20 or 30 pounds of meat on one of the hindquarters. You know, it just started, it didn't smell right. You know, we cut down to the bone and stuff like that as we quartered the elk out. It just didn't smell right. But the weirdest part was when we got back to the elk in the morning, you know, we're all pumped up. We found it, and then we walk around to the front of the elk, and something chewed the face off. So the only thing we could think of was, we looked around for, lions are around. There's not any, there's black bears in southern Colorado, but I don't think a black bear would get at that carcass that fast.
I don't know why they chew the face
Yeah,
off.
I
It's
think-
not a desirable part of
I
the.
think it
I guess
was
it was birds.
vultures,
Yeah.
ravens,
Which
or
is crazy
some type of
at night.
of bird.
Or maybe
at
it was first thing in the
nighttime,
morning or something.
So
That's weird.
So we couldn't really get a lot of decent pictures. Obviously, we took some, but packing the elk out was an adventure. We had not the most decent packs. We spent a lot of money for this trip. I spent a lot of money for this trip, but my son Jordan had, it was like a Walmart brand, pack. It was like a Coleman or some type of, camping backpack. My buddy Joe had his army rucksack, and then I had bought a Sitka 30 bivy backpack. And it was perfect for bringing our gear and stuff in,
Yeah.
but we...
Calling meat's a different.
Nothing with a meat shelf on or anything like that, so, and the meat goes in the game bags, and we cooled the meat down, we deboned everything, and, we got this big, huge lump of meat down in the bottom of the backpacks, and then you come home and you're still on cloud nine, you're still doing more research because you're going the next year or years to come, because we were hooked. I mean, not even the fact that we saw an elk or harvested an elk, but just being out
The
there
adventure of it.
Yeah.
in a western state, I was hooked.
Yeah.
My son was hooked. He's like, oh my God, I hope I can do this the rest of my life. So, we had decent gear, but we didn't have gear that we needed
Yeah.
to make it as easy as possible, So that's some of the things that I upgraded with knowing that we were going in 2019. So we upgraded some of our gear, but we got the elk out.
In a way, it's almost a good thing to go without the gear and to be successful because you see that you can get it done without
you
having.
can get it done without spending a
Right.
boat ton of money.
Right.
I mean, let's.
So did
it
you
was-
did
I
you try
couldn't-
it? Are you doing a different pack this year? Or are you still running the same pack? Or?
I am no. So I actually bought a Mystery Ranch Metcalf. So it's a little more cubic inches. I think it goes up to 42 or 4,400 inches, but it also has the meat shelf on the back.
Yep.
So my buddy Sam from Virginia, who I met through active duty, he's also going on our trip. So that's going to be exciting because he's used to, southern state whitetail hunting, hot weather. He bought, I think, Alps Outdoors Commander X. But it's
Is that
got
what
a
you got?
meat shelf
Or-
on it.
Yeah, I think the same thing I got with a meat
Yeah, I
shelf.
think Chris got himself a Commander, right? Alps
Yeah.
Outdoor Commander. So
Yep,
we definitely
fairly
upgraded
inexpensive,
some
but
gear.
should do the job.
Definitely upgraded some gear, but you don't need the most high quality gear to go out west and hunt. Really, last year this was a birthday present of mine for my wife. It was my 40th birthday, and I had been talking about it, and she said we had the money, and I had $2,000 to spend on gear, so. Daddy spent all $2,000
Yeah.
and then
Good for
some,
Daddy.
Okay,
Yeah.
so it but the cool thing about that is the only thing I upgraded for this year, that was a high expense was my pack. And I had a decent pack last year. The Sitka Bivy 30 pack was a nice pack. It just having that as a day pack and then needing to put meat
Right.
inside of the pack with all the rest of my stuff, it was a challenge.
Yeah.
It was a challenge. But the pack out was fun.
Yeah.
We had the trekking poles out. We didn't have any horns on the back, but we had the trekking poles out. We got some good photos.
Yeah.
And the next morning I think we hunted for half a day. We tried up in the same exact ravine again. We went about halfway up again. We didn't get anything, but we just started the trek back home. We went back to base camp and then ultimately went packed up and went down to the trucks, packed up and headed back west and
East.
or
Eastbound
back
and down?
Yes,
Yeah.
eastbound and down. So back east, but
So
it
now,
was a lot of fun. We packaged the meat in a couple coolers with just regular ice. You know, some of the knockoff Yeti brand coolers that we had purchased before going out. So I think we refilled ice 2 or 3 times on the journey back. So the coolers they did great. I mean, they were underneath a tonneau cover of a pickup truck, so the sun
they're
was
beating down on them. Yeah.
you know, all day long while we were traveling, and the truck gets warm from the engine traveling so many miles and stuff like that. So
Right.
I was happy with the coolers that we purchased. It was just a great experience. It was.
So now that rolls into this year, and so Uncle Chris, this is your first adventure out west, and I know you're pretty
is.
excited about it.
It is.
So where are you at in your? I mean, obviously you must be prepared by this point, but what's been the biggest thing or the most exciting? I guess the most exciting part, or what have you been putting all your effort towards as you approach this hunt? What are the things you're working on?
Honestly, the very first thing I did when I decided I was going on this hunt, without a doubt, is I spent a lot of money on a very nice bow. And then I've been shooting for 5 months. Hunting around here, hunting whitetail, I never cared about shooting more than 25 or 30 yards. I found I could always harvest a nice whitetail. Most were 15 yards out of my tree stand or 20 yards. And like most hunters, I'd get the bow out in September, make sure it's still sighted in. Or this year, and honestly, I never bought a bow in the past 20 years. My brother, Tim, had always, every 5 years he'd purchase a new bow and he would give me his old bow and then I'd put accessories on it. And I killed tons of deer with, I had, the Bowtax, a bunch of different ones he gave me, the XRG. But, so the big thing for me was I wasn't going to waste my time driving out west if I couldn't make a good 50 or 60 yard shot. That was crucial to me. So I spent a lot of money on a bow and good arrows and broadheads and targets. So my backyard is like an archery range. I mean, I don't like to walk out and move targets.
You built a pretty sweet bow rack there too.
I did. I built a very nice bow rack. I discovered for a couple months I would shoot my bow and set it on a lawn chair and then have to come back and set my arrows, my release. So I follow this MMA fighter, Corey Anderson, and coincidentally, Corey Anderson is a huge bow hunter, and on his Instagram page, he showed, this PVC. It's like 1.5 inch PVC, and I was like, that's brilliant. I couldn't believe it. So I went to Lowe's and I pretty much looked at his pictures, made basically the same design, and for like $35 and a can of green spray paint, I built this thing. It has a drink holder. 2 people can shoot side by side.
Gotta stay hydrated, man.
Gotta stay hydrated.
Yeah. So I was in my bottle of water, or it depends what time of day. Maybe a can of beer.
If it's the morning, it's definitely a beer.
Yeah, definitely a beer. But my discipline has been shooting. So shoot some more. Shoot at 20 yards. Shoot at 50 yards. Shoot at 60. I'm very confident at 50 and under, and 60 I'm pretty confident. I would take a 60-yard shot if the animal was standing still, and and the conditions were good.
Yeah.
Right now I have a small block target, and that block target is not that big. I mean, it's probably 16 inches wide, and it's got an 8-inch white circle on it, and I'm not missing it. I mean, I don't miss it at 50 or 60, but my groups are better, obviously, as the closer range. But so that's been a big deal. But then I had to purchase everything for a big. I had to purchase the backpack. I didn't want to break the bank, but I wanted something good based on what Brian and what you said about your experiences. So, that's a big thing for me is to have a backpack. I bought some decent boots. I've been wearing the boots nonstop. We've done training hikes this summer, down on some state land, getting some elevation. Like I said, just the shooting aspect. And then a lot of stuff I already had. I did have a nice little cook stove. I already had that. I bought the Ovis game bags. I actually saw your packing list the other day on Instagram, and mine almost mimics yours. Everything you had, Except for the dude wipes, I thought that was a great idea.
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what?
You got to have some kind of, especially if you're going to be back in there for days.
Sure.
You've got to have some kind of a wet wipe
You
Oh,
do.
yeah.
because you get funky and there's no way
they're the
around
best.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, so
They're
that
the
was on
best.
my list, but it was a reminder when I saw your thing. But, just getting the packing list together, I feel like I'm pretty prepared right now. I'm the one person out of the group who I went for a mule deer tag because we're only going to hunt 2 days, most likely in the first area that Brian went to last year. And then the next 3 days are going to be probably on the San Juan Wilderness, which is about 3 hours west, which is definitely a big wilderness area, a little different terrain, higher elevation, and that's pure elk there. But I want more bang for my buck. If I'm going out there, I got 2 tags.
Yeah.
He told me they saw tons of mule deer. If I can put a nice mule deer buck down the first
Yeah.
day or 2. But if I see elk, I'm quickly going to switch to elk.
Yeah.
But after that, the second area, it's going to be all elk and learning to call. I've been learning to call.
Have you?
Yeah, I've got the reeds. I was actually practicing tonight on I got an hour and a half drive home. Still having a hard time hitting those super high pitch notes on a bugle.
What are you using?
I think they might be the Phelps.
You
I ordered like a variety.
You got
pack.
diaphragm calls.
Yeah, I have 3 diaphragm. One's a cow call, and then there's a couple double reed in there.
Yep.
One might be a triple reed. And then I bought, from Rocky Mountain Elk Call, I bought a nice bugle tube.
Nice.
So I think I can get by, and I'm going to keep practicing more. So
Have you watched? Because I'm a visual learner, and I like to watch somebody do it and
Sure.
I've
listen
watched
to
some of
it.
the YouTube videos.
Have you watched Corey Jacobson's? He's got like a 4-part series that they're just
That is
short
an
clips.
outstanding series.
I haven't
Yeah.
watched his. I've watched some other people.
I'd
a
watch
guy from
his.
Rocky Mountain Elk Calls gave like a tutorial.
Yeah, Corey Jacobson's.
That's his
It's
father's.
on the Elk 101. If you just go to YouTube and
Yeah.
type, search Corey Jacobson Elk 101.
How to bugle or
And I think I might have to trim my diaphragm a little bit. I've watched videos where they say sometimes you might have to trim the edges off the diaphragm to make it fit the top of your mouth.
Yeah.
Right.
And tonight I was discovering I was thinking about that. I'm like, is this really all the way in there? Do I need to trim the edge, 1/8 of an inch on both sides?
yeah.
Because I'm listening to the podcast. I don't know if it was the Rich Outdoors where it was only 7 minutes, but they had somebody doing out calling and then they'd pause and you could try it.
Oh, that's the
Or was that the elk podcast?
The bugler.
Dirk Durham.
Yeah, he's
awesome.
So then his video with the Born and Raised guys,
It's real
he
short.
did. It's a short
Real
video,
short,
but and it's funny because we shot muzzle. We were over shooting muzzleloaders, getting ready for the trip last Wednesday, and Danny, he was with me, and he hadn't been with me, and I haven't bugled in front of him, so I was calling with him, and it's funny because Brian's telling me, Brian Kirsch, he's telling me, he's like, you're too long, so then I'm shortening it up, and it doesn't sound, and I'm thinking it sounds okay, but then Zayler's there, and he's like, dude, he goes, it's too short. He goes, you gotta, and then he's like critiquing me.
Yeah.
And then we pull up the video with Dirk on the Born and Raised page, and I just watched him and then literally just watched him, paused it, and did it.
Yeah.
And Danny's like, holy shit, you just figured it out.
Yeah.
And just watching, Dirk calls out of the
Yeah.
corner of his mouth
Really?
more instead of blowing, and that helped me a lot.
He kind of holds the bugle tube off to the side,
Yeah.
especially when he's lip balling
Right.
and stuff too. Yeah.
And I think the lip balling actually helps me get the growl. And you should try it. Try it
Yeah,
out
I'll
of the
have to
corner
check
of your
it
mouth, not covering,
Yeah.
not putting your mouth over the whole tube, but just
Yeah.
putting it on the corner. That helped me significantly. And you can diaphragm call pretty good for turkeys, right?
I'm decent.
Yeah, so
I'm
you're
actually better
comfortable.
with the elk than with the turkey.
Are
but
you?
yeah, I'm comfortable with it.
Yeah.
The hard part, anybody who turkey hunts knows, when you put this diaphragm in, you instantly want to do clucks and yelps.
Yep.
You're so used to it, and you have to change to this elk thing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny because you do all this prep, and then you're like, I need to know how to call these things.
Yeah, you can blow it all you want. But,
Yeah,
right.
you have to be able to
Yeah.
successfully call unless you're going to bushwhack one, which could happen.
Mm-hmm.
But I think anybody from the Northeast here, especially New York or Pennsylvania, I met a guy at Cabela's, and he's a big elk hunter, goes out west. He drives down to Pennsylvania to Elk County, and he goes, I just drive down and I practice and call real elk. He goes, they're walking around yards. He goes, they're everywhere. And he goes, I'll go down and practice my calling with a real elk. He goes, I don't even get a hunt license.
It's a great
I-
idea.
He goes, I go down, go to
That's
bed and
pretty neat.
breakfast. He goes, I can't remember the name of the town he told me about, but he goes, I just grab breakfast and go out and call elk. And I'm like, that's really brilliant.
That is brilliant. Yeah.
But like a lot of people said though, sometimes turkeys don't sound like real. I mean, I think sometimes we get obsessed with this.
Sounding perfect.
As long as you make this sound, and
Yeah.
you know, you're
Right.
going to be okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, this year will be definitely interesting. We're going
During
later
the
in
rut.
It's a lot
September.
later. Yeah, you
Yep.
were there early last
Yeah,
year.
we're actually, we'll be hunting the 15th, the afternoon of the 15th through the 22nd. So that whole week, actually really, realistically, the 16th through the 22nd, Monday through
Yeah,
Friday.
it's going to be interesting to
So-
see because that's the same exact week that
It's the
we're
same
going to be
week you're
there.
going to be out
Same
there.
weekend.
Yeah,
you guys
and-
are
You're just going to be
yeah.
north of us.
Yep, and it's going to be interesting to see because we are hitting the full moon.
Yes.
So it's going to be
Yes.
very interesting to see how that affects the hunting.
Yes.
You know, the moon, I think it does play a factor, but we don't have a choice. That's our season. That's when we're going.
Yeah, you know, it's funny you mention that because I actually was just listening to or watching either a podcast or a YouTube video where Corey Jacobson was talking about Randy Newberg and Corey Jacobson were on the same topic where I didn't realize this until I listened to this or watched it, where Randy mentioned the elk rut is triggered off of the amount of sunlight in a cow's retina, which is triggered off of the fall equinox, which I think happens either the 21st,
The
or
21st
the
of
22nd
September, yeah.
of September. So I guess from what they interpreted, 5 to 7 days prior to that is
Is
really what
pre-rut.
triggers them
Yeah.
in the pre-rut stage
Yeah.
of the rut cycle, right? So, so I mean, based on that information, you know, because Randy kind of broke it down as a predation type thing, where elk have to have their calves in a certain amount of time
Right.
in that spring and early summer month in order to keep the predation down from wolves and
Right.
bears and everything else. So, you know, he kind of, I guess, myth busted the whole moon phase
Yeah.
criteria. But I think it does. I think it plays a
But I think-
factor in their movement.
I
Yeah.
think Corey. It's interesting with the two of them together though, because I think
It is,
Corey
'cause
is
Corey
big
is
on
a-
the moon stuff.
Corey is big on the moon
Yeah.
phases,
But that's
right?
they live there. They're not going
Yeah.
anywhere.
They
So
do.
in a
They
way,
do.
it's like we talk about the moon phase for whitetails, and it definitely has an effect because we're not during early November in the rut. Like we're not out walking around and still hunting and going
Yeah.
to bedding areas where. With the elk, like I think, yes, they might be doing more movement at night because it's a full moon, but you know, you figure out where they are. They're still going to be out feeding. They might be heading back to
Yeah.
bed a little earlier, but
Right.
you know, it's going to be a very interesting adventure for all three of us because it could be dynamite. And like we're looking at the extended weather forecast, and it's going to be it looks like it's going to be cooling down, and especially up
saw
in the
that.
mountains, like. And it's been very rainy. Like every day, it's been raining.
Very wet.
Some
last
good
year,
storms.
The year that I
was
went
dry,
was
right?
super dry year
Yeah.
for them out there last year. Yeah. So
Yeah, and hopefully this year
is-
there's not a fire ban.
Yeah,
It'd be nice when you start a fire.
they're,
Yeah. Oh, that's right. Because last year it was probably.
Yeah, he said
There was a fire ban last year. Yeah, we couldn't have a open campfire
couldn't.
at base camp.
Yeah, I don't think I know when we were out there on vacation. They have the wildfire signs all over the place
Yeah.
through town. You know what the level is, and there was very little threat. I think I was watching the weather forecast last week, and there was some high winds out there, and it's been fairly warm over the last 3-4 weeks. I think they had kind of a high, fire warning only primarily because of how much the wind was blowing. That if you got a fire going and it got something started, like the wind would really get it ripping. But
Yeah.
yeah, so well that's awesome, and I think says a lot about your ability to prepare and look at something and focus on it. That a lot of us, I'll be honest, I'm guilty of like when I start thinking about a trip, like I'm thinking about gear. Like I'm a gear junkie. I love
Yeah.
buying gear. But like with you, like you right away were like, I need to be the most proficient shot I can be to feel confident going out here to do this. Because I'm not going to
Yeah.
waste you're thinking I'm not wasting my time and money.
If I can't make this shot.
Right.
And that's everything to me. And I'm not a huge gear nut. Like, I don't obsess on it. I get what's necessary. I've got the proper gear. I've done, I haven't even done like my final like practice backpack yet. I've done a couple training hikes and I put what I thought I needed in there. But I do have a big pile in my garage, and I picked up other things, and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna need this, and it's all going in the backpack. But yeah, for me, it's just marksmanship. I want to make sure that when the time comes, I can make the shot. That's like a big deal to me, and having the proper gear, that is important. But you know, I'm not obsessed about it. You know, I did go out. I bought some nice binoculars. There's certain things that you need.
Yeah.
I have not splurged on a GPS like some guys in the group. You know, I can't bring myself to spend a couple $100 on a GPS when I have the Onyx app. And I went online and I ordered 2 nice maps. I'm kind of old school. I have a map for each area.
Nice.
And I'm going to have numerous compasses. So I feel like...
You're covered. You're good.
Yeah, with a map and compass, I'm going to be good, plus the Onyx. I have bought some extra battery chargers. So I want to make sure I can charge my battery out there. So those are like important things to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, if I was to do it over again, I wish I had got Onyx before I bought my GPS last year.
Yeah, I mean, Onyx really
it's
quickly
great.
is just replacing the need for a GPS. It's
is.
unbelievable.
It's outstanding.
Yeah.
As long as you can keep your battery on your
Outstanding.
phone going, I think that's a crucial.
Right.
And I'll say, you weren't really out there that long last time, but
No.
I'll tell you one of my big recommendations, and that maybe it's because you have a Samsung, just like our batteries. Samsung batteries are terrible.
Yeah, mine
So
goes
my
right now.
biggest recommendation to you is put your phone in your sleeping bag with you at night.
Yeah, keep it.
Because the first night I left, it gets down, the temperature
gets
drops,
cool.
and that my
Drains
battery drained like quick overnight
Really?
the first night we were out there.
Yeah.
And I'm like, son of a, so every night after that, I would put my phone, it's
your
in
bag
airplane
with
mode,
it.
and
Yeah.
I kept it on because I used it for an alarm.
Yeah.
But I kept it in my sleeping bag. So
good idea.
kind of a weird suggestion, but
Yeah.
Yeah.
keep your phone in your sleeping bag when you're out camping.
No, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, little things like that.
Yep.
There's a lot
Those
of
little
little
tricks.
things.
Yeah.
One thing Brian said last year, there was an incredible amount of dew in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
He said it was, even though it wasn't raining
Oh.
at night, he said everything was soaked. So I bought a little tarp. Now I'm thinking about that, of things I want to do to keep my gear dry.
Yeah.
Because we all know you can't win the battle. Once you get wet,
Yep.
it's a hard battle to win, especially if it's
That's-
raining out.
I mean, I recommend, depending on the area and the terrain you're in. Like I'm taking gaiters, and
Yeah, I'll
that's
buy a pair.
that's for the morning hike.
Yeah.
Is having those gaiters
I've been
because
contemplating getting gators. Joe, our buddy Joe that we work with, he purchased a pair, and I've been contemplating getting a pair.
I'll tell you what.
I think I
mean,
might buy a pair.
I bought gaiters for that hunt 2 years ago, and I wear them almost every time I'm in the woods now, deer hunting. And I go up
Yeah,
to
we
camp,
make fun,
and everybody
yeah.
makes fun of me
Thought
because I'm
they were
wearing
snake
gaiters. But it's like I can wear my hiking boots for the entire deer season, and I'm not getting dirt,
Yeah.
mud, snow, and it's staying off the bottom of your legs.
Yeah.
Which that's what gets wet.
Well,
then that seeps down your socks.
I-
Your feet get wet. Then you're done. you know?
We've done some training hikes last month in July. We went down to the state land there in Honeywell. And we were 30 yards from the truck, and my feet and my ankles were soaked. And that's when I was like, those gaiters would be nice.
Yeah.
Because you're walking through, grass, 10, 12 inches tall, and your feet are wet and your legs are wet. So I was like, I could definitely see the need for that. So I gotta,
Yeah.
that's something I should just order. It's probably easy to get on Amazon,
Yeah.
for 20 or 30 bucks.
Yep. I just got a second pair. I bought a set of the on Camo Fire. I got the Sitka. I think they're the Storm or the Thunderhead. Maybe I think they're the Thunderheads. They're Gore-Tex,
Thunderhead or something, yeah.
and those are nice. They're real contour fitting, to your leg, and they hold good and tight. I have a pair, and they seem fairly quiet. I have a pair of Cabela's Gore-Tex gaiters, but they're pretty. They're like a Gore-Tex
Noisy.
rain jacket material,
Yeah.
and they're noisy. So if you're trying to really sneak and you
Yeah.
brush something, you're
Stealthy,
making a
yeah.
decent amount of noise. But
Sure.
I don't like those are some of the little things that you think about. Like you talk about the dew in the morning.
It's crazy out
It is
there.
crazy, and
I couldn't believe it.
when you get up higher, with several mornings we had like a real heavy frost. I mean, your entire tent's frozen solid.
Yep.
And that last night we were up in there 2 years ago. I mean, things
Really?
were, oh yeah, like my tent, I went to unzip it and it's like a sheet of ice, like folding it up because you're creating so much condensation just breathing inside of your tent.
Right.
And it was just like, it was a sheet of ice outside. But I would like, I don't know what you bought for a tarp, but like Tyvek works awesome. Just
Yeah, well,
cut a little sheet of Tyvek.
I did want to buy some Tyvek.
If you want some, I'm coming back home this weekend. I'll bring.
If you could bring some, because if you go to Lowe's, I don't want to buy a huge roll.
No, I
want
have-
to do this side of the house.
I have a roll at my house. I'll bring you some.
I
I'll
just
cut a
want
big
like an
sheet.
8x8 foot sheet.
Yeah.
I bought a little tarp, and my thought with the tarp is I was going to carry it while I'm hunting, and if we get rain or extreme sun, and me and my son David want to sit down in glass an area or just hang out. I got
Dave's
5.
going? I didn't know Dave was going.
Yeah, Dave's going to be. He's filming it. He's not going to hunt.
Nice. Is he gonna put it on his ski channel?
He is.
Yes.
So David is obtained some more cameras, and he's big into making videos now. David's a college senior. He's big into this stuff. He's probably better shape. He's definitely better shape than all of us. So this will be no problem for him. He went to Jackson Hole, Wyoming. His first day there, he's like, yeah, we went for a 3-mile run. I'm like, how'd you get used to the elevation at 10,000 feet? He's like, well, we only ran 2 miles the first day, and we watched. He monitors his heart rate. He's all into that. But
Yeah.
David's gonna go, and I'm gonna give him my rangefinder. His job is to tell me how many yards the animal is.
Perfect.
So, and he's
yeah,
gonna
we got
film.
6 of us going.
We got 6 going, so it's gonna be a pretty cool group.
It's gonna be a good time.
But yeah, I mean that gear, the Tyvek, all that is good ideas. And you talk about priorities. The first thing I bought was a cot, and everybody listening to this probably think I'm a big wuss, but I've got back issues, and
You've slept on the ground enough in your
I spent
in your
in
career.
the Army and Marines and hunting. I spent enough years sleeping on the ground, and I started getting bad back problems last year that I was really concerned about. So I actually went to Bass Pro, and I found this little cot for $100, and it folds up. It's less than 4 pounds, and I've tried it out already, and I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna be comfy.
Yep.
I'm at that stage of my life. Yeah, I'm going out there, and I want to rough it and be outdoors in a tent. But I want to, I want to be able to get a good night's sleep, because that's important to me.
Yeah. Without sleep, you're done.
Yeah.
All the research that you do, and it's no different than the hunting that we do here. Is you always want to mitigate the things that are going to send you home.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
And it makes I guess you don't think of those things when you're hunting back here because you're in your routine.
Right.
You know what you're doing.
Oh, I'm wet. I'll go
you
back
know,
to the cabin
"Oh,
and hang my stuff
I'm
up
wet,"
next to the
you know,
fire.
Yeah.
I'll just go back and hang my stuff up, but and you wear stuff that will prepare you and mitigate those things. And you don't really think about that until you get outside your comfort zone and you're hunting in elements that you're not used to.
Mm-hmm.
And you do your research, and everybody talks about you want to purchase things that will keep you from going back to the truck and leaving.
Right.
Yeah.
That's so sleeping bag, tent, boots.
Yeah. A backpack that's comfortable.
A backpack that's comfortable. It's
Yeah.
on your back all day,
Yeah.
every day. Your
Yeah.
boots are on your feet all day, every
Yeah.
day. Socks.
Yeah.
You can get away with your normal pants, your hunting pants that whether you're whitetail, you're a Western hunter, or whatever top you're wearing, whitetail or Western hunter, but the things that you use, like your feet.
Yep.
To me,
Feet are the
your
biggest.
feet
Feet are
are
number
your
one,
biggest. They're what are getting you around.
Yep.
And,
Yeah.
and if you can't get around, unless
Yeah,
you
you
find
can't
an
hunt.
elk right close to the trailhead,
You're done. Yeah.
You're done.
Yeah.
You're done.
Yeah, and I didn't go nuts on my boots. I've been blessed with great feet. Like even in the military, they can issue me boots, and I'll hike 20 miles. I don't get a blister. I feel good. I've run marathons. I don't get blisters. Like I've got really good feet.
I think that's a big factor is the running a lot. I think that toughens your feet up quite a bit
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
I'm, knock on wood. Watch me go out here and get blisters and shit, but I have not had issues with my feet. And I ran that marathon last year, and I've been doing all these.
100 this year.
And like usually people are getting, I'm getting a hot spot or I got blisters here, and then you've worked through it, but like never had it.
No, I've never
So-
had it. I've been blessed.
Yeah.
Me too.
Unless you don't cut, it sounds funny. The only time I've had issues is, if you don't cut your toenails. That's been the biggest thing. But otherwise, I mean, I've done 7 or 8 marathons. I've done 2 trail marathons the past 2 years. And yeah, I got aches and pains. My body's a little sore, and I just ran 26 miles in the woods.
Right. In the mud, like
In the
horrible
mud. Yeah, it's exhausting.
Yeah.
But the feet were not an issue. I was not like,
Yeah.
taping my feet up. But I did go buy nice Timberland boots because my son wears them and he swears by them. And I really liked them, and I went and bought them, and I've been wearing them nonstop, and they feel great. So knock on wood, I won't have any problems this year, with my feet. But I don't discount it. That's important to have good boots.
Yeah. One of the other things I recommend, I don't know if either one of you guys has it, but I learned about it, listened to podcasts before I went on the first hunt, and it's called Leuco tape.
Leuco tape.
You heard of it?
Yeah, I've never
Yeah,
heard
it's
of that.
like,
Do you have any?
it's
Or
like moleskin.
Yeah.
Right?
I recommend go on Amazon and just search up, I don't forget how you spell it, but search just Leuco and it'll end up finding which Leuco tape. And that stuff is incredible. Like I have it, so I have trekking poles.
Yeah,
I've got it
trekking
wrapped.
poles.
I've got like a wrap that's maybe 10 times around on each trekking pole. So God forbid I ever need some, it's right there.
You don't have to
But
carry
like
the whole roll in your pack.
I put it over the end of the barrel on my muzzle loader to
Yeah.
keep anything out,
Sure.
and before we even go in, I put it on my heels. So,
Just
and I leave it on there the whole hunt, the stuff stays right on there. So that's something I recommend, spending $10 and that, like you said, things that are going to keep you out there, like keeping your feet comfortable or,
Yes.
whatever, and if you do hurt your ankle or do something like that, you can wrap it up and you can do a lot of things with that tape, but.
Yeah, I'm hoping the elevation sickness, I don't think that'll be an issue. I think we'll be fine, especially the first area if it's 7,000 feet, and the second area we go up to 10,000 feet. By the third day we should be acclimated, but that's something that I'm aware of. When I was overseas in Afghanistan, I was up to 7,500 feet instantly on a daily basis, and then some of our missions we were up to 8,000, 9,000 feet.
Oh, really?
And I remember how tough it was the first week. Like I'd be out of breath walking up just the tiniest hill.
Yeah.
So
I think
I'm very
once
wary of that.
Yeah, and once you've experienced that, I feel like that's half of the battle.
Yeah.
It's still going to take you a day or two to get used to it, but
Yep.
Yeah.
drink a lot of water.
Yeah. They say hydrate's a big thing.
Yeah.
They say hydrate, and one guy on one of the elk hunting Facebook pages we follow, he's like, as you're driving out there, take big deep breaths and.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I never thought of that. Because even by the time you get to Kansas, I researched it. You're at 3,500 feet.
I didn't
Even
know
though it
that.
looks flat, you're gradually going up.
Yep.
Okay.
I didn't
So-
realize that either until last year when I went out. I'm like, God, my GPS says we're at I remember specifically telling Joe, I'm like, the GPS showed, because we turned it on a couple times in the truck, and it showed that we were at 3,000 something
Yeah,
feet.
you
and
feel
I'm
like you've been driving on flat land.
Right.
I'm like,
Yeah.
holy cow.
Because-
just
So-
gradually going up.
Yeah.
You get to Colorado, and I've flown over it before. It seems like flat land, then there's mountains. That's it.
Right.
But there is a gradual increase.
Yeah, it
there.
makes sense. Yeah, when we hit the state line, we stop at a gas station, I buy a gallon jug of water and just start pounding it. And the guys hate me because I'm about, you give me about 10 miles and I'm
I'm
like,
the same
I gotta
way.
go to the bathroom, I gotta go to the bathroom. Like, screw you, man, we're driving through.
Are you guys driving straight through, or are you
Yeah.
in a hotel?
Yeah, we're driving straight through. Yeah, you guys are stopping.
We're doing a stop.
Couple stops.
He's going to Kentucky to meet his buddy Sam. Me and David are leaving Friday night. We're driving straight through to Kansas, and we're going to meet them Saturday night in Kansas.
Okay.
So we're driving straight through Friday to Saturday night, and then all of us are going to meet in Kansas, spend the night there. Because I'm big on, I don't need a lot of sleep every night, but I don't function well if I'm overtired. And I want this to be a fun hunt. I don't want to feel like crap the whole time.
Yeah,
So
that's why, to be honest with you,
you're
like,
a little
guys-
younger than me.
But I'm still our plan is that we're gonna leave after we get done with dinner with the families. We're gonna leave on Thursday night, and the plan is to drive straight through, leave at 7 o'clock and drive straight through. And on paper, as we sit here,
Yeah.
we're gonna get to the trailhead and hike in when we get there. But we'll see. I mean, that's a long ass journey. I remember when we did that 2 years ago.
is.
We stayed a night in a hotel right there, a mile and a half,
Yeah.
2 miles from where we were going to hunt. And then with that morning we got up, so we had a shower, a good meal, a breakfast, and then we went hunting.
Yeah.
We did
So-
that last year.
I don't know.
That's
We'll
tough.
see. But we want to get up in there for opening day. A lot of it depends
Sure.
on forecast. What's going on.
You guys are
Opening
going
day
muzzleloader, right?
is Monday?
is Saturday.
Oh, it's Saturday.
Yeah, it's Saturday.
With
Oh,
muzzleloader?
okay.
Right.
Okay.
So we want to be up in there opening morning.
Sure.
And that trailhead, I'm pretty confident it's going to be pretty crowded. So if we can, get up in there, I was out there on vacation and went up to that area where we're going to be hunting, and I found an awesome camping spot. But it's a camping spot. I mean, you can tell.
Yeah.
So there's our hope is that we can get there first, but who knows? I mean,
Right.
that's the whole thing about all this. It kind of makes it fun. It's like
Yeah.
You don't know.
we don't know.
We don't know.
We could have all this
We don't
shit
know.
planned out.
It
and-
was
That's why you
Just-
always
get
gotta
out there.
You always got to have a backup.
yeah.
Yeah.
So our first area could suck, and there could be 100 people there, or no elk, and we might go to the next area. And the areas we've plotted on the second area may not be good, so we might have to go to our third. We might have to go across the valley, or
And every one of those moves takes a lot
takes
of time.
time.
Takes time.
Hours.
Takes time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we've got 5 solid days
Yeah.
of hunting.
There
we
is,
gotta maximize.
the one thing I will say is you gotta think about muzzleloader season is a week long. So, those people, whether they're locals or they're non-residents, they're taking that week off of work.
Yeah.
If they wanna hunt during the rut with a firearm,
Right.
all 200 and whatever tags, or 300 tags, 100 tags for whatever unit, they're gonna be in there.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, like
That's
I
the
said,
ex-
when we
no,
got
that's
to
the
that
excitement
trailhead,
of
there
it,
was
though. I
11
like that.
vehicles last year, but when we came out with the elk, after we shot the elk on Monday night, there was 2 other vehicles
Right,
in mine.
yeah,
So it was weekend hunters.
Yeah.
There was-
Yeah, and most people,
Those
our
local
experience
weekend
here,
hunters,
very small amount of people muzzleloader hunt. So I think you're going to find the same out there.
Yes.
You're going to have a small percentage that are hardcore and go out with a muzzleloader because there's restrictions to that.
Right.
So I don't think it's going to be overwhelming. I think it'll be a decent crowd. The locals are going to want to hunt weekends, and then the out-of-staters will be there Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. That's time will tell. That's the only thing we've got.
Yeah.
We can keep thinking about it, talking about it, but we won't know until we show up.
I look forward. I look forward to a month from now, or whenever. Hopefully, we can do this again and
Yeah.
tell our stories. Like, really, how did it go?
Yeah.
It's going to be fun to get together and be like, I could be like, I talked about this and that wasn't a factor.
Yeah.
Or who knows? I don't know what. I could come back with nothing. We could come back each with an animal.
Yep.
I just don't know.
We could come home with 7. Who knows?
Yeah.
So I guess that's where we'll start to wrap this up. I can't believe I just looked at the clock and it's almost 8:30 already.
Yeah.
Judas Priest, I'm in trouble. But yeah, I mean, it's been great to sit down with you guys, and I'm super excited for your guys' hunt. I know we're pumped for ours, and I'm excited to have you get out there and experience that, because it's one more Harvey to get out there and to
for
do
the
it
first time.
DIY, and I knew Dave was thinking about going, but I didn't know he was definitely committed to going. So
Yeah.
that's awesome. I wish the best of luck to you guys, and
You as well.
we
Yeah, good
will
luck to you.
we
You as
will
well.
thank you. We will circle back around here, probably in October, and maybe we'll get up to camp for a night and
Yeah.
sit around the table and tell some elk and muley stories.
Sounds good.
Sound good?
That'll be
Sounds
awesome.
good.
All right. Thank
Hopefully,
you guys.
hopefully they're good stories.
Thank
Appreciate you coming on.
Yep, appreciate it.
Thanks, Billy.